This is an ABC News special report. Now reporting, David Muir.
Good morning. We're coming on the air with breaking news from the Supreme Court at this hour. The justices handing down the highly anticipated ruling on abortion and the fate of the landmark Roe v. Wade decision. This is a majority opinion written by Justice Samuel Alito, very close to what was leaked several weeks back. The justice is saying we hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled. I want to bring in Terry Moran, who has covered the Supreme Court for many years. Terry, bottom line, what has the court said this morning?
Bottom line, Roe versus Wade is overruled. There is no constitutional right to an abortion in this country anymore as of today. Justice Samuel Alito in, as you say, an opinion that tracks very, very carefully, as far as I can see at this point, with the opinion that was leaked, the draft opinion, says without question it is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. Again and again, he knocks down in this opinion, as he did in his draft opinion, the claim that there is a right to choose an abortion in the right to privacy or the right to liberty under the Fourth Amendment. He says that at the adoption of the 14th Amendment and the Constitution, abortion was a crime in this country, and that there was no talk about a constitutional right to an abortion until the latter part of the 20th century. He says that this court does not have to abide by the Roe versus Wade precedent because it was so wrong, because it has not settled the issue. And he says, without question, it is time now to return the issue to the people, which will open the doors, obviously, to all kinds of legislation and laws that have already been passed and are now good law in those states which passed so-called trigger laws. As soon as this opinion comes down, abortion is outlawed in many states in this country. The bottom line, once again, just as it was in Justice Alito's draft opinion, this is an opinion that from now on, there is no more constitutional right to an abortion in the United States.
You know, it's interesting, Terry, because initially in this opinion that had been leaked, Justice Alito had written previously that we cannot allow our decisions to be affected by any extraneous influences, such as concern about the public's reaction to our work, talking about any reaction actually to that leak or what could happen if this ruling came down. And it would seem in delivering the same opinion today that that's exactly what they've done here. They've ignored any potential public reaction to this.
That's right, David. There was some question when the draft opinion was leaked. Boy, this sounds very absolute and extreme. His tone that Roe is egregiously wrong, that any constitutional right must be located in our country's history and traditions. People were concerned about how that might impact gay marriage and other rights that are not specified in the Constitution. It looks to me like he doesn't pull back from any of that. Now, there is a concurrence by Chief Justice Roberts. He concurs in the judgment, so he doesn't sign on to all that, but it looks like 5 justices do. So this is not only overturning Roe, but overturning the entire approach to constitutional law. That just because something might not have been a constitutional right when the Constitution was written in 1787, perhaps the generalities in the Constitution can be read to guarantee these rights to people marrying people of the same sex, to constitutional right to choose abortion. Contraception isn't mentioned in the Constitution either. It does seem that this opinion opens the door not just to overruling Roe versus Wade, but to other rights that many Americans have taken for granted that are based on the same reasoning, that the Constitution can evolve.
Terry Moran, stay with us here. You're watching ABC News live coverage this morning of the Supreme Court's historic ruling this morning, overruling Roe versus Wade in this country. It will have a profound impact on abortion rights in America, in this country. In fact, as you heard Terry mention moments ago, the impact will be felt almost immediately. In 13 states, they have what are called trigger laws, which means it would take any abortion rights off the books as they currently stand. 26 states in totality could actually change their laws almost immediately. There you can see the map on the screen there. Those are the states expected to ban or severely restrict abortion rights almost immediately. I want to bring in Rachel Scott, our congressional correspondent. She's live outside the Supreme Court where people are already demonstrating this morning. Rachel, what's the reaction down there?
David, this is a seismic shift. People from all over the country gathering here today, and take a look at the reaction. We have seen tears of sadness, tears of happiness from people on both sides of the issue today. And take take a look as I want to bring you into the fencing that has been up here around the Supreme Court since that leak draft came out. This fence wraps out around the entire Supreme Court complex because they have been preparing for this moment. David, I've been covering this issue for over a year. I've been traveling to many states, speaking with Republicans that have been trying to restrict abortion, talking to women that have had to travel hundreds of miles to get an abortion. This is a new reality for women in this country, David.
Rachel Scott, obviously reaction coming in already, and reaction on both sides of this issue in this country. We'll go back to Rachel when we can hear her a little more clearly, obviously being drowned out by the immediate reaction at the court. I want to bring in Kate Shaw, our Supreme Court contributor, legal scholar. And Kate, what do you make of the decision? What stands out to you?
You know, this is one of the most important decisions the Supreme Court has handed down in this century, you know, certainly in the past half century, but it'll stand with among the most important decisions of the Supreme Court. Look, for, you know, nearly half a century, Americans, women, but all Americans, have structured their lives and made their choices with the sort of understanding that if contraception should fail, they have abortion, a constitutionally protected right to terminate a pregnancy, essentially as a backstop. Justice Stephen Breyer, who wrote the dissent for himself, plus Justice Elena Kagan and Justice Sonia Sotomayor, basically writes that the state can control a woman's body and a woman's destiny by taking from her the choice to continue with or to terminate a pregnancy. And I think this will have seismic impact on women's lives and on the choices they can make and really on the course of the country. So it's an enormously consequential decision. And Justice Alito says that it doesn't call into question any of the court's other precedents on things like contraception or same-sex marriage. But the dissent, I think, rightly points out that the logic of the majority opinion very much calls those cases into question, whatever the majority says in insisting that it does not call those rights into question.
Kate, let me ask you, because you point out in the dissenting opinion their states can control a woman's body and destiny. Bottom line, in those 26 states we were just looking at, obviously 13 of them have the trigger laws. Bottom line here, what does the future look like for women in those states if they were going to get an abortion?
Well, as of today, you know, in many states, these trigger laws will go immediately into effect. And in other states, there are laws that have been struck down by courts because they were inconsistent with Roe. And those decisions will no longer be enforceable. And so those laws will come back into effect in many instances. And in several other states, it's clear, because political leaders have said they're going to again pass laws to criminalize or prohibit abortion in all or nearly all instances. And so, you know, those women will either seek to travel to other states if they want to terminate a pregnancy or continue with unwanted pregnancy. And some states have also indicated they're going to move to make it difficult to leave the state to obtain abortion care elsewhere. So, you know, in no way does this decision, right, end the roiling national debate about abortion. In some ways, I think it's going to kick it into higher gear as we see states begin to respond.
Kate Shaw describing a time we haven't seen in this country in 50 years, a situation where women in this country will have to travel across state lines if they're looking to have an abortion, if they're in one of these states that will have a trigger law that goes into effect immediately. In fact, there are 13 of those, 26 in total, that plan to take action almost immediately. So in 26 states in this country, if a woman seeks to get an abortion, will most likely have to travel outside that state to find the opportunity to make that decision on her own. I want to bring in Devin Dwyer, who covers the Supreme Court for us. And Devin, this country knows very well these Supreme Court confirmation hearings, and every time there is a justice who comes before the American people and the Senate, of course, to answer questions, they're always asked about this issue. They're very careful with their answers, but almost always we hear about precedent in this country and respect for precedent, and this law was on the books for 50 years. So what are Americans to make of the answers they heard from some of these justices before?
There's been a lot of attention, David, on those statements and at least the confirmation hearings of the three most recent justices appointed by Donald Trump. Remember, with the express purpose, goal of overturning Roe versus Wade, which they've now accomplished. And during those confirmation hearings, they were asked Will you stand by Roe versus Wade as established precedent? Stare decisis is the doctrine of the Supreme Court. Let decisions stand. And today we saw in a concurrence from Justice Brett Kavanaugh, he said that stare decisis is not absolute. The conservatives today, David, making clear that they have a more expansive, flexible view of stare decisis. And Justice Alito saying that in cases where decisions are egregiously wrong, the court must act. They did that in Plessy versus Ferguson with that separate but equal doctrine way back, Brown versus Board, overturning segregation in schools in the 50s. Today, this conservative majority making clear they're doing just that, correcting a wrong in their view, David.
Devin Dwyer, who's with us here this morning, covers the court for us. Devin, stay with us here. We'll certainly come back to you before the morning is done, our coverage here this morning. Stephanie Ramos is in Mississippi. She's at the clinic that was at the center of this case, testing the future of Roe versus Wade in this country. And Stephanie, what's the scene there?
Well, David, as you can hear, there are some anti-abortion rights activists on a loudspeaker behind me, but you're exactly right. This is the clinic at the heart of the case. It's the only abortion clinic left in the state of Mississippi. It is run by the Jackson Women's Health Organization. It's also known as the Pink House. As you can see, it's a pink building here situated on the corner. Also on the corner, anti-abortion rights activists who are here to persuade women not to get an abortion. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road, David. Families have depended on this clinic. Women have relied on this clinic year after year. A recent estimate showed more than 2,500 women received an abortion here in a year in the state of Mississippi. Now, if this clinic closes, it could have severe impact on the lowest income communities. Keep in mind, here, Mississippi is one of the poorest states in the nation. Now that Roe has fallen, as you mentioned, some 26 states could ban or severely restrict abortions. That's including Mississippi. And we know that women have traveled here from other states like Texas and Oklahoma. They have already set some of these bans in place, but now those women and women here in Mississippi may not have an option to visit this clinic, David.
Stephanie Ramos in Mississippi at the clinic at the center of this case. I want to bring in Carrie Severino. She's the president of Judicial Crisis Network, a conservative organization. And Carrie, I know this is considered a major victory for you and the people that you work with who have been working for 50 years to get Roe overturned.
Absolutely, but most importantly, because this is a return to what the Constitution simply says, and I think that's what the majority opinion is very clear about, is the Constitution nowhere provides the right to abortion. That's something that some states may choose to do, but that's not something that's in the federal Constitution, and the Supreme Court has to limit itself to deciding cases based on the Constitution itself. So this will put that issue back in the hands of our elected representatives. That's where it was for most of American history, and I think that that's where the Constitution leaves it, and so that's the correct result today.
I wanted to ask you, Carrie, about the most recent polling. I know that you're aware of it from the Pew Research Center, also from Quinnipiac just in the last couple of days, that 61% of Americans say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. What do you make of those numbers and the fact that this ruling would appear to go against what the majority of Americans are hoping for, asking for?
It doesn't in any way contradict that. I mean, what this is saying is, yes, if you would like to make abortion legal in all or most circumstances, now you have the ability to do that at the legislative level. That's something that Americans, again, always until 1973, had the ability to legislate on this issue. It's simply not in the Constitution. So the Supreme Court's job is not to look at opinion polls and say, well, what do people want? Let's come up with laws that reflect what people want. No, their job is to simply interpret the Constitution and interpret the laws that are actually passed by Congress and passed by our elected representatives. So if most Americans want to see that, that's what we will see, but we'll see it in a legislative way rather than judges usurping that legislative power.
Carrie Severino, president of Judicial Crisis Network, a conservative organization that has worked to see this day come true. She says this decision is rooted in the Constitution, that this should be at the state level where this decision is made, and that's what she believes the court has decided here today. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us. I want to bring Terry Moran back in because Chief Justice John Roberts did weigh in on this decision. You've had more time to pour through this. What have you found, Terry?
Well, David, this case has 5 conservative justices voting to overrule Roe versus Wade. It has 3 liberal justices opposing that, and it has John Roberts, Chief Justice John Roberts, in the middle. He says that he would have validated the Mississippi law at issue here. Mississippi passed a law banning almost all abortions at 15 weeks. He says that's all you have to decide. You don't have to decide that a woman no longer has a constitutional right to an abortion. And he says we should adhere closely to the principles of judicial restraint here instead of, quote, repudiating a constitutional right we have not only previously recognized, but also expressly reaffirmed. He says that the court is too full of certainty on this issue, and he would wait for the next case to come. He's lost control of this court, but it is significant that a justice as conservative as John Roberts is looks at what his conservative colleagues did and says that that's judicial activism.
Very interesting, Terry, that the Chief Justice was appearing to write that there could have been some sort of meeting in the middle here, some sort of a compromise. As Terry points out, 5 conservative justices, majority opinion, 3 liberals, and then there was the Chief Justice John Roberts, who said we could validate what Mississippi is asking for, and that's all we have to do. And Terry, one more question before we move on and ask about the White House reaction, what the president might do. We have Dr. Jen Ashton standing by as well. But Terry, one more question for you, because Justice Breyer, in his dissent, talks about the court, how the court will be viewed in this country. And I bring this up because you just talked about the Chief Justice losing control of the court, in so many words, what you just said. Justice Breyer writes that one of us once said that it is not often in the law that so few have so quickly changed so much. For all of us in our time on this court, that has never been more true than today. In overruling Roe and Casey, this court betrays its guiding principles. With sorrow for this court, but more for the many millions of American women who have today lost a fundamental constitutional protection, we dissent. He talks about the court betraying its guiding principles, that there has been such swift change on the court.
And that, David, is what justices are always concerned about, because the power of the Supreme Court comes from the confidence and trust of the people. That is why people respect its opinions. And if its decisions shift because one political party gets to appoint some justices, that erodes confidence. This is bedrock belief of justices throughout our history, that they should abide by the law and the canons of judicial conduct in a way that doesn't seem to communicate to people that they're just another political institution. And what Justice Breyer is saying there explicitly, and what Chief Justice John Roberts is suggesting, is that this is an activist decision. This is a decision that did not have to be made. And that, given the nature of the issue and how it has been brought to the court, will suggest that this is a court not of judges, but of politicians in judges' robes. That is the danger that Justice Stephen Breyer is alerting the country to.
All right, Terry Moran, stay with us here. We'll continue our coverage here this morning. I want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, because, Cecilia, this White House knew since the leaked opinion that this very well could happen. What action have they been planning behind the scenes, if any at all?
Yeah, and David, they have been holding a number of emergency meetings behind closed doors in the weeks since that leaked draft opinion came out, certainly preparing for what has happened here today. The White House has said all along that they would be ready when and if this time came, but they have played it very close to the vest in terms of what these options are. I will just tell you, we have not heard an official reaction from anybody in the higher levels of the administration, certainly not from the president. He doesn't have anything on his public schedule today. He is getting ready to head overseas for a foreign trip to Europe, but certainly this decision will impact and overshadow so much of this trip's to come. The president has asked the Gender Policy Council for what advice on what to do. The White House Council has been weighing legal decisions and moves that the president could make. Lawmakers, advocacy groups have been pitching in these closed-door meetings. So you can see right here on the screen next to me some of the options that are on the table. This is a very broad range, and frankly, we're doing a little tea leaf reading here because they haven't signaled exactly what they will do. We're talking about potentially declaring a public health emergency. They could sue states for being at odds with FDA policy. They could allow abortion pills to be provided at at pharmacies. They could ease restrictions on the imports of abortion pills into this country. And there is this one. They could lease federal buildings to abortion providers. The thinking there is perhaps some of those sites are out of jurisdiction of some of these states where the procedure is now banned. But look, David, advocates have told us all along, and certainly even people inside the White House will tell you privately, this is not something the president can executive order, can executive action his way out of, no matter what the president decides to do. If he does decide to go the executive action route, that is not going to overturn this ruling. The president has been lobbying, frankly, the White House has been asking and hopeful that Congress would codify Roe into law. They do not have the votes. The Democrats do not have the votes. Republicans certainly have not wanted that to happen, and there's no expectation that they will after this. But all eyes, particularly from the left and liberals and progressives in this country, are on this White House starting today, starting this minute, to see what they will do to help women in this situation.
Cecilia Vega, our thanks to you on the potential options, though they are limited for sure, that the White House can take, the potential steps that the president might try to take. But again, the road is very limited because, again, you have just witnessed here on our coverage the Supreme Court ruling to overturn Roe versus Wade, allowing states to ban abortions across this country. We have mentioned the numbers before, but if you're just joining us, that means 13 states with so-called trigger laws can move to ban abortions immediately. 26 states in all planning to take action very swiftly. We heard from the president of the Judicial Crisis Network, a conservative organization, Carrie Severino, who said this is what we have been working for 50 years in this country, and she made the case that this should be back to the states. That's where the decision-making on this particular issue should take place. We will, of course, hear the other side of this as we continue our coverage here this morning. I want to bring in former Senator Heidi Heitkamp, who's with us here this morning. Heidi, obviously you come in on the other side of this issue. An extraordinary morning, an historic morning, 50 years of precedent in this country overturned. What's your reaction?
My first reaction is, who is this going to hurt the most? It's going to hurt low-income women who seek abortion mainly for economic reasons, and they can't afford to get on a plane. Once again, the difference between the services that can be provided to rich people in this country and poor people in this country have taken a huge impact today. But more importantly, this is the first time in my history that the Supreme Court has taken a step backward on individual rights. And it is absolutely amazing to me that one president, Donald Trump, can basically override the will of literally millions of people in this country who believe that this procedure should be available and safe for women across the country. There's nothing about this decision that doesn't further divide our country. And by that, I mean, now all of a sudden, we're going to see huge divisions between those red states that state legislators have basically enacted trigger laws. Huge differences in blue states making abortion available and safe for women. And once again, young women who grow up in a state like mine are going to say, if you can't recognize my right of privacy, I'm not going to live in your state. And so this has huge ramifications for the social fabric and the political fabric of our country. Probably what everybody's going to be analyzing is how will this affect the midterms? For years we always said one issue voters have really driven this issue. But now, is this going to be a one-issue vote that people on the other side take, and are we going to see implications in the midterms as a result of this decision?
Former Senator Heidi Heitkamp, ABC News contributor, talking about the divisions between red states and blue states in this country only deepening, she believes, because of this particular issue and now this decision coming down from the Supreme Court, overturning Roe versus Wade this morning. 50 years of precedent in this country, sending it back to the states. And we already know that some 26 states plan to take action, if not immediately, in the very near future, to overturn abortion rights in their particular states. One state where that is not the case is obviously Connecticut, where the governor, Ned Lamont, in May signed the first in the nation reproductive rights legislation. Governor, first of all, your reaction to the court this morning and what this means, in particular for the women in your state, and why you took action in recent weeks.
I'm shocked that 50 years of precedent has been overturned by this court. The idea that politicians can stand between a woman and her doctor and let them make the right choice, and I can guarantee you it's not going to happen here in Connecticut. We're going to respect Roe v. Wade. We've got, by law, Roe v. Wade continues despite what the federal government does. And if there are any women who feel like their rights are being abused in other states, they're welcome here in Connecticut.
And, Governor, of course, you're only the governor of Connecticut. You don't have any say over surrounding states or, for that matter, states across this country. What do you make of what you just heard from the former Senator Heidi Heitkamp, who said this is only going to deepen divisions across this country when you have some 26 states planning to take action and a return to the time when women who are seeking an abortion will very likely, if they can afford it, have to travel across state lines in this country to exercise that right?
I agree with her. I think you're going to find people voting with their feet. I think women and companies may decide, I want to go to a state that respects my right to choose, and Connecticut will be one of those states. And if you're somebody coming from Texas where they have vigilante justice and they try and enforce it against the doctor and the woman if she goes out of state, we're not going to let it happen here in Connecticut. We're going to protect those women that come into our state, and we're going to prosecute right back.
Both sides reacting very quickly this morning. Governor Ned Lamont echoing what we heard from former Senator Heidi Heitkamp this morning, describing a country where women will have to go across state lines to exercise their right. Of course, we heard from Judicial Crisis Network on the other side this morning saying that they believe 50 years in this fight has finally brought victory for them from the Supreme Court in returning this to the states to make this decision, that state lawmakers at the local level should decide the future of these rights.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.